Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener, and it's balance patch time. We knew it was coming, there was always going to be one, and so, as is my wont, I'm going to go through the balance patch announcement that we have just had. We're going to go onto 1939's website, and I'm going to go through the whole thing. Talk about my opinions. As ever, I am a Kards content creator, avid player of the game, architect of a lot of new player content, some of which you may well have seen on Kards' main website and in other places. If not, do check out the YouTube and all of the stuff down below, especially if you're new to the game. All of my stuff is there to help you, and if you're a more moderate player, then I have game theory videos and deck discussions. I stream twice a week, generally speaking, 17:30 UK time, Tuesdays and Saturdays most weeks. And of course, I keep up YouTube content, substantially more of it at the moment, as we head towards Covert Operations, which is the next expansion and the reason we have a balance patch. First of all, I suppose I should say, if you are a newer player watching this, what on earth is a balance patch and why do we get one with an expansion? So, the quick version. The balance patch is literally that. It is alterations to existing cards that rebalance the game in some way. We generally get them quite regularly, and we will almost always get one with a new expansion. It's great. It goes alongside the rotation, which I've done another video about, and helps refresh the card pool and, in theory, keep the game in a healthy state. It, of course, also provokes lots of discussion because it will have impact on cards that you like or don't like, archetypes that you like or you don't like, stuff like that. And in this case, does actually call out the starter and level 12 decks, which we will get into a bit when we get there. So, without further over-discussion, we are going to go to the actual balance patch and dig right in. So, come join me. Okay, so we are on 1939's website. This is the straight balance patch, and I'm going to take it straight from the top because there's no reason not to. So then you don't want to read this, I'll read it for you. Listen to it in my dulcet tones. So, Covert Operations change, card balance changes. Hello, friends. This June we'll see our summer expansion drop for cards, Covert Operations. As we have done for the past two expansions, we'll also rotate out cards to the reserved pool. You can see a video about that, with a few returning from it. So, a bunch of new cards coming, lots of beloved and not so loved cards leaving, and old favourites returning. What more could we need to shake up the meta to its foundation? Why, a balance patch, of course. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. So, when Covert Operations sneaks up on you on June the 11th, a few cards are seeing some changes. Balance changes this time around can be divided into three groups. First ones consist of 3 cards we are adjusting for the upcoming meta. Another 3 changes are to returning cards, and the final 7 cards are changes to some olden goldies to help on new players. We are using the opportunity now to adjust the starter and level 12 decks and want to brush up on some of the older cards that have fallen a bit by the wayside, power level wise. But without further ado, let's take a look at what's changing in the upcoming patch. Right. Let's take this apart a little bit before we go any further. So, things I want to call out on here. There is the shake the meta to its foundation. This is not as much hyperbole as it might have been in the past. Covert Operations, the rotation, and indeed this balance patch are shaking up to be quite meta-altering right now. There are bits and pieces happening to a lot of strong meta decks which may or may not alter the way that they play or the level to which they are played. I talk about this a lot in my reviews. You can go and check my videos, which should be on the same playlist as this, in which I talk about the actual rotation and also the new cards. And I also talk about the new covert mechanic, and there's loads more coming. There are videos coming on the covert mechanic. There's probably going to be a video coming on the discover mechanic. I have stuff coming over the next 7 days to keep you engaged with, but also ready for Covert Operations. That is my aim. And I will be paying particular attention to the 7 changes and what I think they actually mean for starter decks, including some speculation, because I don't have them yet. I am hoping to have access to the new starter deck lists in time to have my starter deck videos updated as early as possible in the new patch, but I am dependent on 1939 and how they stand on releases / NDAs. So I'll be getting stuff as quickly as I can. So if there's part of what you're watching for, be aware, it is going to happen. I just can't tell you when. Anyway, other things that I want to call out here. So they break down into 3 groups, which is interesting for me. So 3 cards we're adjusting for the upcoming meta. These are meta adjustments. We'll talk about them when we hit them. Another 3 changes to returning cards. Changes to returning cards are something that we are seeing, and I quite like, because I think it can make returning cards more interesting. And then, of course, the final group being the old school cards that are being adjusted to try and come back for this. So this should be quite interesting. So the first balance change is to the 85 Pioneer Company from Britain. Now, we'll deal with the balance change in a minute, but first, let's have a look at what they have to say about it. The 85 Pioneer Company can generate a lot of value, especially in the late in the game when you string a lot of when you're sitting on a lot of credits. This can be problematic in certain decks, so we want to curb its power a little bit. The new version means players will now have to gain incremental value from the card over the course of several turns. Note, however, that the card no longer has the minimum of 1 clause, so a 1k order can now be played for free if it's the first order played that turn. For instance, if the enemy starts and deploys a 15th Cavalry Regiment, it is now possible to deploy a Pioneer and immediately naval power United We Stand through the breach, etc. on the first turn. The loss of the explosive turns in the late game means this can be deemed an overall nerf, but slightly stronger early play makes up for it a bit. Right. That's what 1939 have to say. Let's look at the actual change. The actual change, the old 85 Pioneer Company is a 1-cost, 4-op cost, 0-4 smokescreen. This is a set of cards I've talked about as being some of the strongest elites in the game. And it has, or I should say nowadays had, your orders cost 1 less credit to a minimum of 1. This card was ludicrous value and too strong. I have said this in videos, other people have said this. I have suggested, along with other people, notables including, I think, JKing7 made exactly the same suggestion I did about what this order probably should be, which oddly, and I take no credit, and I'm sure no one else does, 1939 though, might be listening, who knows, oddly, they went with precisely the change I would have made. Literally the only change on the text of this card is the first order you play each turn costs 1 less. So they remove the minimum of 1 clause, so you can play a 1-cost order for 0, which is nice. But also, this only applies to the first order you play in a turn. Given that we are about to see a lot more shift towards Brit order decks, commandos, we're looking at you, this is not as much of a nerf as people might think it is, but it is enough of a nerf to take what was, in my opinion, a ridiculously overpowered and far too good value card, and put it more reasonably. Honestly, the thing about 85 Pioneer was just how quickly it could pay for itself. How fast are you in profit? Return on investment on this card is so quick, because you play 2 orders and you're a credit to the good. That was insane. I mean, it's still the case, but they have to be 2 turns worth of orders. You can't late game out, as they discuss in this, 85 Pioneer Company, and then fire out a ton of orders. This also, for those of you who were not fans of Brit main push decks with Soviet ally, slows this thing's effect on the push combo substantially. Instead of discounting the classic 4-card push combo that was often used, which is Red Dawn, push, which it would reduce the total cost of that by 2 on the 2 Red Dawns. It now only reduces the total cost of that combo by 1. Small change, but a relevant one, because it would reduce the first Red Dawn, of course, to cost 0. Anyway, My general opinion on this is that this is just a good change. I'm not, of course, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my god, 1939, what are you thinking about doing? You're making the change that I personally would advocate for. That would be a fairly contradictory thing to do. For me, this is a very good change, a very sensible change, and a very needed change. I think this is good design. This is a sensible change to a card that really needed it. Right, next card is the 67th Baranovichi. This is a subtle change but an impactful one, so let's talk first about 1939's commentary on this. The 67th Muad'Dib Baranovichi. I love this, by the way. Kudos to whoever did the copy for this. I would have made the same joke. It's remarkably apropos if you like Dune. Has single-handedly elevated a ragtag army of tiny fighters into fearsome killing machines with a special penchant for killing black-clad bald men. His revolutionary days may not be over, but we are curbing his enthusiasm a little bit. Okay, so first of all, yeah, kudos to whoever did the copy. It's a good copy, and this doesn't need a lot of explanatory text, because if you have played the game, or watched some of the commentary on the game, you will understand why Baranovichi is so polarising. But this is going to be a bit of a history lesson, because this is more complicated than what you're seeing on the screen. The 67th Baranovichi launched, or was around, with the text as shown on the base card, which is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 2/3 infantry that has Alpine. Your light infantry units have Alpine as a special card. Right, when this first came out, it worked the following way. You played 67th Baranovichi, and every light infantry unit you played afterwards gained Alpine. Thus, and any light infantry unit you had on the board had Alpine. So, and this is where it gets interesting. So, initially what would happen is the Baranovichi would drop as a 2/3, changing, let's assume, actually, let's do this clearer. Imagine that you have a board state where you have 2 light infantry, which are the tokens of the tokens deck. They are 1 cost, 0 op cost, 1/1 infantry on the board. You play your 67th Baranovichi. The 67th Baranovichi would hit the ground as a 2/3, at which point the light infantry gained Alpine. So technically you had 3 Alpine units on the board. Then you would play No Surrender and get 4 more Alpine light infantry units, each of which had Alpine, and therefore the first one got +3 and was therefore a 4/4. The second one was a 5/5, the third one was a 6/6, and the fourth one was a 7/7. Right, so far, so clear. It's just creating Alpine. However, it was pointed out that the card text, as printed, had a problem with the way it was working. As written, Baranovichi is an Alpine unit. That means when you deploy it, it should get +1/+1 for every Alpine unit on the board. Since the text says your light infantry units have Alpine, the question becomes the firing order of these effects. Does the Baranovichi count light infantry that are already on the board for its own Alpine keyword? So, anyway, Baranovichi's around for a while, sees some play, and then 1939 drop a correction to Baranovichi. I put it in the air quotes because I personally don't question it, but they basically honoured the word of the card and looked at the way that they were happy interpreting it, and actually went, yeah, okay, the way this card is written, if you have 2 light infantry units on the board, when you play your 67th drops as a 4/5. Because those light infantry have Alpine, which means it gets +2/+2. This was not a balance change or a correction. This was a straight buff, because it meant that your Baranovichi suddenly became a lot harder to remove. Then along came a card which I still think was slept on for a while, but might have stopped being, judging by the number of times I've talked about it and the fact that we're seeing this change, which is No Retreat, which is a card which makes a card unable to retreat and immune to suppression. If you dropped your Baranovichi with 3 or 4 light infantry units on the board, and then dropped No Retreat on it, it became ludicrously hard to remove, because it was a massive body that you couldn't retreat from the front line, so you can't retreat it to slow down the production of light infantry in the support line, and you can't suppress it to remove its effect. You have to either trade it out or use hard removal, and hard removal often caps on, well, usually it will cap on something, or it will be expensive. This is a thing that made tokens very strong. Right. To the change. The change to Baranovichi is a very simple wording change. Literally nothing alters on this card except the following. Your light infantry units have Alpine. The only change to this card is that the Baranovichi itself is no longer an Alpine unit. How big is this change? Well, now it gets complicated again. So, firstly, it is quite impactful because it reduces the buff the Baranovichi gives to all light infantry deployed after it by 1. It also slows the Baranovichi's role into becoming a massive unit of doom, as discussed before, which in and of itself is just a balance change, and a fairly fair one. Tokens was getting a lot of play, and quite strong for climbing. I had talked about the fact that Tokens was a really good deck, and continued to be, and to a certain extent will continue to be, a really good new player deck. Come to that in a minute. However, to really understand the impact of this change, you also have to know that one of the core token cards, No Surrender, which is a 5-cost card which deploys light infantry units until your support line is full, that's 4 light infantry units if you have a clear support line, is gone. It has been rotated out. The combination of losing the burst deployment of No Surrender and 67th Baranovichi becoming slower might be too much of a token nerf. I don't know. We won't know until we see play, and this is the like, literally, as far as I'm aware, the patch was announced last night, and this is the morning of. I've not had a chance to test anything, but I do know that many tokens players are wondering if this is really not good for their decks. Do I think it's going to make tokens completely unplayable? Absolutely not, no. I've been on record as saying that even the removal previously of No Surrender was, I tested tokens without No Surrender and it was fine. It was still playing really, really well. Add this in, it's going to slow down a bit more. It might slow down too much, we'll find out. But, as I said, one of the key reasons that this makes me raise an eyebrow is that Tokens was one of the best decks to recommend to a new player because Tokens doesn't use elite cards. It does not need elites to function, which means that the fact that it runs primarily off standard and limited cards makes it accessible to newer players. Which, in fairness, may also be a reason why you don't want it to be too strong, because it's very, very easy to get a good tokens list quickly. Anyway, generally speaking, I'm okay with this change in principle, but I am interested to see how heavy its impact on the tokens list and its play actually is. I think it might mean that we need to see a card that lands. Maybe one will. Maybe there's one coming in the expansion I haven't seen yet. But tokens might need something to balance out the two things it's lost. Anyway, that's the Baranovichi change. Next up, we have a German order. This is Mountain Offensive. This is an Alpine card. We'll get to that in a minute. So, Now that winter is over and summer is upon us, we enter that time of year where we can collectively hate our social media friends for all these see how fit and active I am selfies they post on their mountaineering exploits. Meanwhile, as mere mortals can now launch our own mountain offensives more easily in our make-believe but oh so important virtual worlds. Okay, fine, someone's having fun with the text. I like that. I think it's nice to have the light text, which is why I'm reading it out. But let's get to the meat of this. So Mountain Offensive is, in theory, an augmentative order for the Alpines deck archetype, which is primarily German-Italy, Alpine unit focused. Mountain Offensive was a 7-cost order that says, add a random 1-cost, 2-cost and 3-cost unit with Alpine to your support line. It is a special order, and it gives you 3 Alpine units, which of course means that at minimum the second 2 are getting +1/+1 and +2/+2 respectively, and let's be honest, you're probably getting more. But 7 cost was heavy. This card didn't see a huge... well, I mean, it did see play because Alpines needed the help, but the reality is Alpine has always been just too slow to be as good as you want it to be. Which is kind of a shame, because it's probably the most core tribal style deck. I'm not going to get into the history of the tribal thing in card gaming, but it's probably the most core, like, tribal concept deck that we have in the game, and I always thought it was a shame that it wasn't more playable than it is. Dropping this to 6 cost, which is the only change that they have made, might be enough to give it a buff. I don't know if it's enough of a buff on its own. I think we'd need to see some more Alpine support. But it's a step in the right direction, and I think 6 is probably a much fairer cost for this order than 7. I'm good with this. I think this is a good change. I'm not going to linger on it for too long. I think it helps gently buff up an archetype, which you do have to be careful with. For those of you who are Alpine fans and are constantly wondering, come on, just give us the big buff, we want to get better, I will say, as a designer, you always have to be careful, in my experience, with anything tribal or connective, i.e. what I would call exponential gain in keyword design. So going slow with increasing Alpine may be frustrating for you Alpine players, but it does make it less likely that you're suddenly going to get good and then get nerfed to oblivion very quickly. This just helps. I like it. Okay, so let's move on. So we're now moving to the changes to returning cards. So next up are 3 changes to returning cards. Specifically, these are 3 changes to research options. The 3 research cards, Royal Research, Reich Research, and US Military Research, are returning with Covert Operations. Each one can lead to 4 unique research options. These cards were heavily played the last time they were in the active pool, and this highlighted that some of the research options were slightly subpar. So, in order to balance the research package a bit better and make each research decision more interesting, we are buffing 3 research options we feel most needed it. Right. Before we even begin to get into discussing what's next in these cards, it is probably wise for me to explain to you how research cards work so that you don't have to go and watch my video, although if you want a more detailed look, go and check out my rotation video where I do talk in detail about all of the research cards and their options that are returning. The basic concept of research is pretty simple. You start by playing an order. So each research card at base is an order. It is a 3-cost order. When you play that 3-cost order, you get a choice. You can either take a card, which is a 0-cost order, and use it. It is the early payoff. Or you can take a second card. Second card, the expanded research option, or the tier 2 research, is another order. It is 6 cost, which means that you have to pay another 6 for a total of 9, at which point you get the choice again. You can either choose the payoff at tier 2, or you can then get another order. the advanced research. The advanced research costs 9, which means in total you've paid 18 credits. But use 3, then 6, then 9, 18 in total. But you then get to choose from 2 Tier 3 payoff cards. Those Tier 3 payoff cards are generally very strong. They'd have to be if you're paying 18 credits, because in addition to the 18 credits, some of them actually cost more. Some of them cost like 12 credits, and therefore it's a total of 30 credits to get there. Anyway, that's how research works. It's a tiered system, so you start with the base card, you pay 3, you choose whether to take the payoff or not, then you can use the second card to choose whether to take the tier 2 payoff, and then you can research into the third tier and get access to 2 choices of tier 3 payoff. That's the TLDR-ish. If you want the detailed look at all of the options, as I say, check out my rotation video. There'll be a link. Synthetic oil. Right, there were certainly cases where this option could be leading to blowouts the next turn, but sadly these cases were rare, so to make the option slightly more enticing, we're tagging an extra draw in there as well. Right. Quick, simple. Are we running out of steam a bit, 1939 writers? I mean, I know the feeling. I've done enough copywriting that I personally know how it feels to run out of steam. But yeah, no pithy jokes or stuff in here. There's a few you could think of about, you know, industrial might or... Anyway, no. Stop it, Bear. I'm not here to talk about writing methodology. What I am here to talk about is synthetic oil and the change to it. So first of all, synthetic oil is the tier 2 payoff for the German orders, German research tree. So you would play Reich research, and then you would choose expanded Reich research, which means that you would pay 3 for Reich research, then 6 for expanded Reich research, which then gets you the option of choosing this card. So this card effectively costs 9. I can see where people are going here, because, okay, 9 credits for 10 credits? How is that good? It's good because burst. 10 credits in a burst can be huge. However, I completely agree. I have said this before, it's not that strong. I think I say this in my own video. This buff is nice. It's gained instead, now it says, gain 10 additional credits and draw an extra card next turn. I like this. I like this quite a bit. I think it's a decent change. I think adding tagging a card draw onto this does make this a more enticing option. I do think it'd be even more enticing if the card draw was now. Just kinda a thing. But it's a decent buff that makes this a more considered option at tier 2. Whether it will see lots of people doing it or not depends on how much you want a burst turn. But a burst turn with an extra card draw can be really good because it's giving you more access to things to play. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this as a change. Next up, we have the tier 3, or one of the 2 tier 3 choices for Reich research. Anyway, it always felt a bit of a shame that a card with such a cool art and visual effect when played saw so little play. Partly this was because the other high-level research option for Germany, the Type 21 U-boat, is so strong. You could go see my video. But mainly because spending your whole turn on this was usually too little too late. Now you gain a few credits, providing an opportunity to get some key plays in alongside clearing the enemy board. Right. This is Uranprojekt. Uranprojekt is the one of 2 options you can choose for the tier 3. So, to get to this, again, you have to pay 3 to play Reich research. Then you have to pay another 6 for a total of 9 to play expanded Reich research. Then you have to pay 9 for a total of 18 to play advanced Reich research, and then you can choose this, which costs you an additional 12 credits for a total of 30 to use. Right. And the old text was 12 credits, destroy all enemy units. It's a massive, mighty board clear. And a bit weak sauce. I talk about this in my other video, is the too little too late thing, is the point that I make in my other video. The thing about this is that this is not helping you go anywhere after you clear what presumably is a really bad situation. If you're willing to chuck 30 credits into a massive board clear against your enemy, you're playing for a big late game turn, or you are losing hard. So, this clears the board, but doesn't really help you regain position. Except now it kinda does. So the new text is 12 credits. Destroy all enemy units, gain 1 credit for each unit destroyed. Now this is not small. This is a very good buff, which may see this card get more play. I don't know whether it will, but it might, because I'm not going to lie, this then gives you some operating capital to try and turn the board around, which is exactly what this card needed. This is what Uranprojekt needed from the beginning, in my opinion. So I like this. I like this as a returning card. Now, I have no attachment to the previous orders. The previous research options were around before I joined the game. So I have no attachment to these. I have no nostalgia for them or particular thing for them. I'm just looking at them objectively as cards. I think this is a really good change, which might help this card see some more play. I think it's smart work, and I applaud 1939 for doing it. I don't know whether it's enough, but it's certainly a good switch. Right, to the next of these which has been changed, and this is the US order. This is the US research option, by the way. So, this option was mostly chosen for its removal option when you were in a tight spot and didn't have time to build towards the nukes. Get to that in a minute, but it was too slow and clunky. So now the removal is built right into the option. It has less effect, but you don't have to spend an extra 8 credits. The B29 is then just a bonus that can sometimes come in clutch in the late game and in certain matchups. Right. So, let's go look at Pressurised Cabin. So Pressurised Cabin is the Tier 2 US order payoff. So once again, you would start by doing US military research, or 3. Then you would pay another 6 to do expanded US military research, which will get you to either going on to Tier 3 or choosing this card. So far, relatively clear. Right, so then when you play this card, the first thing is let's get the B29 Super Fortress out of the way. If you don't know what the B29 Super Fortress is, it is the 15 cost, 4 op cost, 9/9 Blitz bomber. It is one of the clunkiest and most ridiculous cards I have ever seen in this game. I can't actually remember whether I've ever actually seen it played, because you need 19 credits to take advantage of it, or some way of reducing it. Obviously, if you control the front line, it costs 3 less to deploy, which takes it from 19 to 60. Big deal. You still need 16 credits to pull the thing off and the front line. So, let's be clear. The Super Fortress is not that big of a deal. Granted, it's 9/9, has heavy armor 2, and is a bomber. So if you can make it start working for you, great. But realistically, that's probably not going to happen on a regular basis. So, yes, this card would primarily be played for its clearing effect. So anyway, what was the deal with that? So the deal with that was that you would get this card, and then you would choose. You gain 2 cards in your hand. So when you play this, you get the B29 Super Fortress and High Altitude Bombing. High Altitude Bombing is an 8 cost elite US order which destroys 2 random enemy units. So to pull this off and get full value out of it, let's really be clear about what this order is. We pay 3 for US military research, and we pay 6 for expanded US military research, so we've invested 9 credits, so we're 9 credits deep. Then we choose Bombs Away. We choose Pressurised Cabin. I want to call it Bombs Away because of the art. 1939. Why didn't you just call it Bombs Away? Anyway, cool art by the... Oh, God, I'm there. If Neil is watching this, which he probably is, I tried. I got this far. Anyway, there's a friend of mine who got me into this game who's been commenting on the fact that, wouldn't it be easier if I just said, well, I don't like art in this game. I tried in this one. Anyway, side effect. Right, so you would be 9 credits deep. Then you add 2 cards to your hand, the first of which is high altitude bombing and costs 8, so that's 17 credits deep to destroy 2 enemy units, and then you need to find at minimum 16 credits to take advantage of the flipping bomber. That's 33 credits. It's bonkers. Anyway. Not the greatest of cards, not gonna lie. Despite its usefulness, the expense is an issue. So, the change. Bombs Away, again, Pressurised Cabin, the zero-cost payoff order now, is now add a B-29 Super Fortress to hand, as before. Destroy a random enemy unit. No muss, no fuss, no high-altitude bombing, no 8 credit cost to play the thing, just boom, an enemy unit blows up. It is a great change. This turns this from an utterly terrible card into a piece of removal, which at times could be very, very useful. This is 9 cost, destroy an enemy unit, and gain a win condition for late game in a ramp deck. Because it's not impossible to take advantage of the Super Fortress, it's just really hard. Super Fortress, by the way, if 1939 are watching, if you really want it to see play, might need a tweak. It might have seen play in the past, but realistically, at the minute, the value is just not there for me. It's too expensive to actually pull off. But anyway, my point being, this is a really good change. This makes this a very attractive option if your enemy has a big threat on board when you're considering whether to go to advanced research or not. Because being able to just snap fire off your enemy's biggest threat is not nothing. Yeah, I like this. Good change. Okay, so now we come to the third of the 3 categories discussed at the beginning. Here are the 7 changes to spruce up the starter and level 12 decks a bit. So, first of all, I'm going to get some criticism of 1939 out of the way. And I love you, I do. You know I support your game. You know I will continue to make content for it. But you really, really, really could have made this a better article by opening up by just giving us the starter and level 12 deck lists in the article. Please. Because then we'd have context. As it is. Sorry, grumpy face. Because I want new players to have a good experience in this game, and I want to help new players have a good experience in this game, and part of that is being able to use detailed information. To the extent that the last time there were changes to the new player experience, I actually started a completely new account and played 60 levels, that is, all 12 levels of the first 5, the base 5 nations, to get access to the decks and see what had changed. No, really, I did, and I may have to do that again. I really hope I don't. Anywho, on to the point. These are cards that in theory are impacting the new changes to the starter and level 12 decks. Now, I, being me, I'll hop over here, have done my due diligence on this. These are my spreadsheets. I'll do this properly, so if anyone actually wants to slow this down, you can. These are the starter decks as they stand, with a notation of anything that is rotating out. Funny thing, me doing this, but this is how I go about it. If anyone wants to, you want a quick look into the back of how I go about doing what I do and making the content I do, this is the sort of thing I do. Right. That being the case, obviously I have this open on under the screen because I'm going to need to reference it in a bit. Spoilers. I'm going to be having to use some conjecture and supposition about how these cards will be relevant. And I may be wrong about a chunk of it. Do not take, unless I say, with certainty, unless I actually state that I know it to be a fact, basically everything I'm saying beyond the changes that we've seen in text is supposition about how I think this will come together. I have not seen the new decks yet. Right, to the M1340. Right, the Italian M1340 is seeing the biggest changes. Its old form had a lot of words but saw little play. We are hoping its new form, with a lot less words, sees a lot more play. In a sense, it can be regarded as the big brother of the Panzer 35T and could fit well in a combined arms shell. Right, 1939 text. Lovely. Let's break that down a bit for those who have no idea what half of that is talking about. First of all, combined arms is a deck that functions on the principle that you run multiple different kinds of units, specifically infantry and tanks with artillery and air in support, a la the combined arms methodology of warfare. Cool. Germany-Italy combined arms was a thing, kind of sometimes still can be, but isn't as much as you'd think. And also combined arms is an order in the game, which plays into that archetype. Anyway, Panzer 35T is a incredibly common card. It's very heavily played. It is a limited tank, and it's a flipping amazing card. It is a 2-cost, 1-op cost 2-2 German tank, which on the face of it ain't that much. However, it has one of the best pieces of text in the game, which is reduce the operation cost by 1 if you control an infantry. It becomes a 0-op cost 2-2 Blitz tank. Blitz, by the way. It's amazing, it sees a huge amount of play, and hyping this as the big brother of that card is a lot. So let's see if it lives up to it. The M1340 in its old form was a 3-cost, 2-op cost 3-4 tank. Limited card. Deployment. It gains Blitz and Fury if you have more units than the enemy. Otherwise, it gains Guard. Yeah, it's a lot of text to pass. So either you play this and don't have more units than the enemy, at which point it is a 3-cost, 2-op cost 3-4 Guard, which is frankly not great, or you play it when you have more units than the enemy, and on the face of it, it's amazing, because it's a 3-attack Blitz Fury tank. I can put this down and run forward and hit the enemy twice. I mean, you can, if, of course, you have more units than the enemy, and 9, my apologies, 9 credits. 9? Yeah, 9. So, 3 to put it down, 2 to move it forward, 5, 2 to attack the first time, 7, 2 to attack the second time, 9. So this is a turn 9 drop for 6 damage. That is a huge amount of effort for 6 damage. And yes, you could in theory put combined arms on it, but then you're adding to the cost even more, and it's even more late game, and it never saw play as a finisher. Overall, it's just not a great card. Okay, so what's the new version? The new version of the M1340 is a 3-cost, 1-op cost 3-4 tank. And it has deployment. Gains Blitz if you control an infantry. I love this. I love the simplicity of it. I love the design of it. I personally think this is probably actually going to see quite a chunk of play, because now it's 5-cost, 3-4 blitzing tank. So it's a 5-drop if you want all the value out of it. 3 to deploy it, 1 to move it forward, 1 to attack. Turn 5 drop, Blitz with you control infantry as a limited card. Yeah, this really kind of is, barring the fact that it doesn't get 0-op cost from somewhere. This really is the big brother of the 35T. I like this. I still think 35T is better value because 0-op cost is huge, but I think this will see play. I certainly intend to experiment with it. I think it's a really good change. Right, so I said I'd talk about this, and I'm going to with each of these cards. So what has this actually got to do with the starter decks? Well, first of all, this card isn't in any of the starter or level 12 decks. I want to be really clear about that. It's not. I checked. So, the only two decks that actually use Italy as an ally are the Germany starter deck and the Soviet level 12 deck. The Germany starter deck is not rotating out any Italian cards, but it is rotating out 2 copies of Joint Operation and 1 copy of Vesp, which is where I personally think we're going to see this card, but I could be wrong, at least 1 or 2 of them. It's also losing the Trop, but I don't think that's relevant for this. I don't know for certain. In my previous commentary about not taking this as gospel, but if I were to hazard a guess, which I'm going to because I'm me, I would guess that the M1340 is going to be in the German base Germany-Italy starter deck. I don't think it's likely to be in the Soviet deck. Doesn't seem like as much of a natural fit. It might be, but I don't think so. We'll find out. Unless, of course, we're seeing a complete refit of the starter decks, in which case all of this just goes out the window. But assuming that they are staying at least roughly the same, that's where I expect to see this. Next up, we have a British card. This is the 3.7-inch anti-air gun. 1939 text. Artillery is always dangerous at lower levels, so we want to be careful about buffing such units. This change makes the card slightly better for new players and in draft, but we do not anticipate any big ripples with this change. Spoilers, I think they're probably about right. So this is a 5-cost, 1-op cost British artillery. It's 2/3, it's limited, and it has deployment to pin all enemy air units. It's super situational. The change is pretty simple. It just becomes 4-cost, so it's a bit cheaper. The nice change makes it slightly more attractive. Genuinely, honestly, don't think that it's going to make it see much, if any, more play. Because it's still not great. It's still very situational unless you're playing against a lot of air units, and it's still very expensive because by the time you're deploying it, probably already battering your HQ down, or they've got a bomber that's done enough damage already, and they probably have removal to get rid of this. Yeah, I don't think it's a big change. Anyway, however, the next question is, hey Bear, what's this got to do with the starter and level 12 decks? Okay, so the first answer is, on the face of it, absolutely nothing. This isn't in the starter or level 12 decks for Britain. It's not there. And Britain's not rotating that many cards. Britain is losing the 26th Engineer Regiment from its starter deck, which might be where we see a one of this card. Honestly, that's all I've got. That's it. That's the only place I can see, unless we're seeing the specific charges, that this might be a one of in the Britain starter deck. At which point, no one cares. It won't see a lot of play. I mean, it might also replace the Irish Guards, I suppose, in the level 12 deck, but I would expect that to be replaced by a Guard unit. Overall, this is a very meh change. This is a card which, if you're getting it in the starter decks, which if you are getting this somewhere in the starter and level 12 decks, it appears to be in the text of the thing, you're not going to keep it around for a long period of time. It's way too situational to be good, which is a shame because I like the art. Oops, done it again, but I do. I really like the art on this. Anyway, there we go. Next up, we have the M7 Preist, which is a US artillery piece. The same does not apply to the M7 Preist, referring to the previous commentary about the artillery. It is now much more aggressively statted and has a decent chance to see some play at higher levels. We want this card to be at a similar level to the German Nobelwerfer, and the two should be a lot more comparable now. Right, okay. Clearing my throat, because I have a lot to say about this. not going to shock anyone that I'm going to have opinions on this, because this is an interesting aim from 1939. So let's talk about the Nebelwerfer, which is another limited artillery piece. It's another 3-cost limited artillery piece. The German Nebelwerfer is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 2-2 artillery piece that has deployment. Deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. Does this see play? Yeah, it does sometimes, because 1 point of ping isn't terrible and artillery can be good, particularly at lower levels. At lower levels, this can be a very relevant thing. They are not wrong when they state above that at lower levels, and occasionally in draft, artillery can be quite powerful, because it's not easy to deal with until you're used to dealing with it. Trying to get this to a similar level as the Nebelwerfer is a very noble goal. Have they done it? Well, let's find out. So the old M7 Preist was a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 1-2 artillery. It was limited, just like the Nebelwerfer, and had a deployment effect, which was gains +2/+1 if you controlled the front line, making it a 3/3 if you controlled the front line. Didn't see a lot of play. If you did control the front line, it wasn't terrible, but it's not doing anything until the turn after you've put it down, which was the thing that held it up. After that is 3/3 artillery if you've got the front line, which isn't awful. 3/3 artillery can do some work. Right, what's the change? 3-cost, 1-op cost, 2/2 artillery with deployment. Gains +1/+1 if you control the front line. This changes basically nothing. I see where you're trying to go with this, but this still does not have the appeal of the Nebelwerfer, which is that when I deploy it, I get to do a point of damage to something, and against aggro decks, that can be really handy, because that can remove a threat. This is still all kinds of slow, and the payoff hasn't changed. I'm still getting... The only thing you're doing is that if for some ridiculous reason I'm deploying this without the front line, it's a 2/2 rather than a 1/2. Which is nice, but really? Is this going to see the same level of play that even Nebelwerfer plays, which isn't actually super strong? It's just occasionally situationally good. No. Sorry, it isn't. It's a nice change, but it's not enough. It needs to do something on the turn that it's deployed. Swear to God, you could have just reduced the buff to +1/+1 and given it blitz. Maybe. I mean, that might be a bit strong, but you'd have had to do something similar for me to actually look at this and care. At me, talk to me if you think I'm wrong. If you're looking at this and going, oh my god, I'm going to play this so much in my frontline deck, let me know, but I'm not. Alright, so we've done this with everything. What has this got to do with US decks? Okie dokie. So on the face of it, absolutely nothing again, because this isn't in the US starter decks. However, the US starter decks are being rotor-rooted. They are losing a lot of cards. US starter and level 12 decks are losing the 26th Infantry Regiment, they're losing in Hour of Need, they're losing Red Devils, they're losing the 112th Infantry, and they're losing the 2nd California, and if that wasn't enough, they're also losing the M4A1. Right, there's so many spaces that I'm not even going to speculate, other than I expect to see 2 or 3 of these in the new US decks, either at level 1 or level 0 rather, or level 12. Probably at level 0, but we'll see. That's the best I can give you, because the changes to the US deck, and until we actually see the new lists, are just... they're too large for me to be able to properly speculate. I wish I could, but I can't, so we'll have to wait until we see it. But in the end, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, because even if you do get access to this, I don't think it's going to hang around for a long time, because, really? To the 59 Panzergrenadier, a German infantry regiment. A long, long time ago, this was one of the key cards in aggro decks. But after its defense was nerfed to 2, it disappeared into obscurity for the most part. It is now regaining its 3rd defense back, but there are a lot more aggro and anti-aggro tools now available, so only time can tell if this card manages to regain its glory days. Spoilers, I'm going to beat time, or try to. At the very least, it will be a lot more solid option for new players taking their first steps. Right. 59 Panzergrenadier is a 2-cost, 1-op cost infantry. That isn't changing, by the way. But the original card was a 2-cost, 1-op cost infantry. 3-2. Indifferent stat. 59 Panzergrenadier can move and attack during the same turn. So it's a tank. Only not. It's an infant tank. And it's a standard. Big change? Gets, as they say, it gets its defense point back. Does this regain its glory days? No. No, it really doesn't. Sorry, it just doesn't. If you want this to have its glory days back in the current aggro metas, it needs blitz. Might need less attack, it might need something else, but it needs blitz for anyone to care. There are better infantry options that you'd rather sit on your support line or do something more functional for you to activate your 35Ts off. And this is too slow anyway because it's 2 cost to deploy. You want 1 cost infantry to be activating your 35Ts in an aggro deck. So it's useless for that, and the fact that you deploy this for 2, but then the next turn you can pay 2 to move it forward and attack is frankly indifferent. It's just if this was a 3/3 2 cost 1 op cost tank, it still wouldn't see play. However, for new players, this doesn't suck, actually, for the starter decks. Now, again, I'm not 100% sure where it's going to fit in, but if I was putting money on it, I think it will, assuming that Blitzkrieg remains the level 12 deck for Germany. It's going to replace the 56 Jaeger Regiment, which is leaving. Seems a pretty clean swap to me. I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference. I don't think it's amazing. But it will see some play at early levels. And a 3/3 body that can move and attack early game, like when you're first starting out in cards, isn't terrible. Glory days. Sorry, 1939. That ain't happening. However, it does make this more attractive at early levels, and it might see play for a bit longer. So, at least some of the change is successful, in my opinion, just not all of it. T-43 Hayabusa. T-43 Hayabusa is a Japan aircraft. Another old staple, faded into obscurity, is also getting a slight facelift. The extra attack does make the Hayabusa a lot stronger, but probably does not compensate for the extra credit cost now encumbering it since its heyday. We could still see this sneak into some very dedicated destruction-based burn decks. Okay, here we go. This is indifferent. I'm underwhelmed, but okay, let's talk about it. The Key 43 was 4 cost, 2 op cost, 3/3 fighter, standard card that had destruction, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ. Fits into the Japan archetype of cards that blow up and damage the enemy some way. The change, giving it +1 attack, alters. It doesn't blitz. It does mean you probably want to remove it earlier, but at 4 cost, it's so slow to play. At 3 cost, I can see why this used to see a lot of play, by the way. But at 4, because it would be pretty. At 3 cost, this would not be a bad card. And honestly, maybe make it slightly less resilient or do less damage, something, and get it back to being lower cost, or reduce its op cost, or something that actually has impact other than giving it a point of attack and hoping. I see the hopes and dreams, but they are going to be dashed against the rocks of inevitability. Psychic prediction. However, this card is in the Japan base deck, and so you will have 3 copies of it, unless something changes. There you go, you got some extra attack early on in the game. Sure, why not? Burn decks, dedicated burn decks might run this, but honestly I don't think they will because they have better options. Dewoitine D520. Dewoitine. My French should be better than it is. I have a French-speaking, or had a French-speaking grandmother, but you'll have to forgive me if my French is terrible. Anyway, let's look at this. Historically, the Dewoitine was actually quite a decent fighter that performed very well. We want to reflect this a bit by improving it slightly. French air decks are a viable thing is still far away from reality, but they now have one more decent body to fill out the roster. Not the most ambitious statement you've ever made, but okay. Certainly not up there with the confidence you're giving the Italian tank. However, the old version, 4 cost, 2 op cost, 3/4 fighter that's limited and deals +2 damage to air units. So far, so meh. In effect, it's a 5/4 air unit killer, but at 4 defense, it's very easily popped. So it kind of just take out one threat. The new version, 4/2, 3/5, otherwise remaining exactly the same. Extra point of defense. Is that a big deal? Not enough that you're going to see it at high level play, but at low levels, it suddenly becomes quite good for giving certain air units a bad day. This now can trade into, say, a Zastora, which is the 4/4 German aircraft, and live, giving it another trade. So it gives it the potential to trade twice rather than once into air units, which is not a bad buff. I still don't think it's enough for it to see significant play, and they're absolutely correct. We're not going to see French air decks based on this. But it's actually a decent change. It makes it more viable, and you do get 2 of these in the Britain starter deck, so sure, why not? Buffs it up a bit, gives it a little more longevity. I've seen worse changes. Not going to alter this thing massively in play, but it's a solid idea. For freedom! I had to do it. We're on to the last one. So, last but not least, we have For Freedom, one of those iconic cards that has never really gotten its time in the sun. That might be about to change, as reducing its cost to 1 makes this a much more appealing package. A cheap draw with a small buff can improve a lot of decks, and you can expect to see people fighting for freedom a lot more in the near future. Can you? Can you really? Well, let's find out. So, For Freedom. This is was, I should say, a 2-cost US order, with a fantastic piece of art on it, which was it's a special, by the way, so you can run 2 of them. Give a unit +1/+1, draw a card. I mean, +1/+1, draw a card's not terrible, but 2 cost is very slow for this. I kind of agree. The change is really simple. It's now exactly the same card, but costs 1. This will see more play than its previous version, and it certainly will be something to think about if you get access to it. So what's interesting to me is the implication that you're going to get access to at least 1 copy, if not 2 copies, of this special card in the US starter decks. Now that's interesting to me, because this is not bad as an early game special. It really isn't. This might be replacing something like in Hour of Need, in which case it's a one-off. Or it might be replacing Red Devils in the level 12 deck, in which case again it's a one-off, which is where I expect to see it, but I don't know for certain. That would be my guess. In either case, this is not terrible. Card draw in a card game is never bad. Early on in this game, when you are playing with a much smaller collection and a lot less access to the stuff that all combos together, being able to give a unit +1/+1 and draw a card for 1 cost does not suck. Will this card see a lot of play at higher levels? No, because as a special, it's just a bit underwhelming by comparison to some others. But early on, if you have one of these, it's going to hang around in your deck for a while, because it's really quite good value at 1 cost. I really like this as a change. I think it's a very smart change. I kinda sorta hope we're actually going to see 2 of these in the US starter decks, but I don't think that's going to be the case because it's a special, which is a shame. Because no one's going to be going out to craft this, which is a pity because this will be a staple for a while in US decks in the early ranks, because that's good value. Right, signing off. I might as well do the sign off because I've done all of the other text from 1939. So here we go. That's it for the balance patch coming out alongside the Covert Operations expansion on June the 11th. Keep an eye out on our Discord channel where we can smack in the middle of spoiler season for the new set. Keep the feedback coming and we'll see you on the battlefield, Commander. Absolutely 100%. You can do all of those things. You can also just watch my videos too. In fact, obviously, I think you should. Right, wrapping up time. So we've seen some changes. I've tried to break them down as efficiently as I can. They're interesting. I'm not going to re-over my opinions of it. On the whole, I think this is a decent balance patch. There are some things that I'm not 100% sure about. There are some things that I think are pretty good. And there are plenty of things that I think are largely indifferent, as you will have noticed. That said, overall, it's not a super heavy balance patch, and I'm always happy when the balance patch isn't massive. Because we're already seeing enough meta shake-up with the new cards coming in, the cards rotating out, new mechanics, and everything else going on. There's only so much more shake-up that I think this game needs before it becomes excessively over-facing for new players, which is why I'm also glad to have seen 7 changes aimed at newer players. I may not agree that all of them are good changes, I might have done some things differently, but I applaud you, 1939, for making the effort to do something about the starter decks. I look forward to being able to break the starter and level 12 decks down. I sort of look forward to having to re-theory craft improved starter decks. I say I sort of look forward because it's fun, but it's also a lot of hard work, but I will definitely be doing it. As ever, I will still be around with more content still to come. For right now, stay well, be good human beings, and I'll catch you next time.